Day 3's in the bags. We just got out not too long ago, so I'd like to hear your takeaway on day 3. Day 3 was a little weird because I think we were supposed to talk about premium PVOs, premium value offers. And I don't know that we necessarily covered that in granular detail, or maybe that's just because the VIP session was so significant to me, it stuck out more. So I'm curious to get your take on it, and what would you say for someone? Now you're at the halfway point of the course, halfway point of the challenge. So what would you say to someone that's maybe watching for the first time if they're evaluating it? And what should they get? If they're watching for the first time, who's the person that should get $100 thing, $300 VIP, and then the person that spends $800, $900 to ask a question?
Yeah, so day 3, I'm evaluating the course in terms of how much value I'm getting. I consider myself getting value every single day. During that challenge, I learned something new I didn't know. So today, the thing I really learned was, it was at the very end of the challenge, but it was significant, around anything you say during a sales conversation that is not helping that person realize the transformation or understand the transformation that you are offering is doing the exact opposite thing about selling. And that is going to completely change the way I speak to prospects on sales calls. And so that's extremely valuable. Now, I will say, if you're coming into this expecting to get tactics and exactly what to do, you're not going to get that. But there's enough thought there, and there's enough clarity on the problem and why that's so important, because Myron did this amazing illustration around belief and doubt and faith and how it all comes down to the heart. And that stuff for me as an engineer that seems really kind of nebulous a little bit at times, but it doesn't matter what I think, because Myron is very successful. Obviously he gets it, and he is way ahead of me. So it's been really valuable for me. I would say the VIP session today stood out a little bit less than it did on other days. I feel like it was more, maybe it's because we started to hear some of the same questions from the earlier participants. And so some of the magic of that initial problem that Myron was going into, this was like more refining what they were talking about. But there was still so much value. Would I do the VIP all over again? Yes. So you mentioned criteria. So today, I'll say this, the challenge challenges you to think about your business, what you're doing today. Because what you're doing today is you don't have the answers. And so I really went back to like 2 days ago in the workshop for like step 1, because now I know a lot of stuff around what to do, but I still have to align on how we actually are going to do it. And so a lot of that comes back to bedrock foundational principles. What is the criteria? What's our goal? Where do we want to be in a year from now? That was the question I had for you. And I kind of answered that, around the criteria being, we sat down and we talked about, where do we want to be as a business? Where do you and I want to be as entrepreneurs?
Was that from the course? Was that actually in his course?
No, it wasn't. It was in, tell me about a little bit more about the dip.
So I'll talk about that in that separate video after we do this. But that idea comes from the dip. I think in a future video, you and I will record on something like the top lessons we learned from over a decade of building startups or whatever.
I still need to read that book, by the way, or listen to it. I think you had sent me a copy.
Well, it's really good. And a lot of it actually, it really dovetails nicely with what Myron's going into, because everything really, if you think about it, you could be so far along, but you're not at your goal. And so Myron's course and the book, The Dip from Seth Godin, which is really nice because it's like a 90-minute audiobook. It's super easy to do if you're having a long walk or whatever. It's like, do I continue? It's these series of, do I continue doing this? Am I at my goal? Yes or no? Am I, at the goal in the amount of time that I wanted to be at? Yes or no? And this series of questions, am I in a cul-de-sac? Am I at a dead end? Or am I going through the dip? And should I persist? Like, it's really helpful to have that. And I think on the outside looking in, people might be like, oh, you're, at X amount a month, like you guys are successful. And it's like, well, yeah, but that's not my goal. And so it's really helpful today, number one, to back up and be like, you and I have built so many businesses. And I think sometimes it's easy, it sounds crazy, but it's like, it's easy to overlook, like, what's the reason I'm building it? What's actually the lifestyle I want? Where do I want to be? Do I want to exit this? What do I want to do with it? Like, you're like figuring out transformations for your customer and all that, but you don't even have your own transformation figured out. So it's like getting locked in on that is really helpful because these videos, I'm always thinking like I'm talking to you or I 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Like I want to help that because Alex Ramosi can talk to the guy that's ahead of us, but I want to talk to the version of me that's.
And I think
5 years
I
ago.
would really like to talk about that specific topic in the next video you wanted to do, which was the 5 things to not do or 5 things to do when doing a startup, because we're less than a full year in, and it's changed even since when I started the company when we were at $0. And I'd like to actually speak to that person that's going to watch it at $0, because it's easy for me to even think about just the future of where we are. And because we have a pretty good foundation now, I would love to speak more about what to do when you're starting at a blank slate.
Yeah, and we will. We can go into that. I do think that flexibility, like that is, our intern is on the other side of this who's recording this, and I'll have to like put some B-roll in. Do you want to like throw your face in real quick? No? Okay. I'll put some B-roll in. But I think this is his like first internship at a tech startup, and I think he's been somewhat traumatized by like the pivoting and how quickly things switch. But when you look at it, it like makes so much sense. Did you know that Samsung started out as a grocery store? Like they were like a grocery vendor, grocery purveyor of a couple of different foods. And like look at what they create now. It's like your business has to be able to be flexible and go through these iterations. And I think to a certain point that can be bad, right? In the book, The Dip goes into that more. But anyway, getting back on track for Myron's thing, sounds like you're enjoying it so far. What part did you say you were kind of numb to, the VIP session? Because they're kind of asking more specific questions.
I wouldn't say numb to. I would say the most impressionable part of today was the general education course, because it was all new content to me. The VIP session today was it was mostly questions, follow-up questions that were asked on day one. And so therefore, like the magic of the initial problem statement was kind of already answered. Now this was more refining in tactics. Refining in tactics wasn't as interesting to me because those businesses aren't exactly my line of work. And a lot of them aren't in B2B. A lot of them are B2C. And so I would say that's actually an interesting thought. And we had a conversation about that too. Most of the content in this course, and I want to protect what I'm saying here because I don't want to think of this subconsciously, I do feel like most of the content for this course is more applicable for B2C types of sales. And you please disagree with me if you don't. I just feel as though I'm trying to take some of it and make it work for B2B. Because when I think of Myron, I think of YouTube. I think of all the ways that he brings an audience in, and I don't see how that would work for our business. But it's just because I have to think about the full context of all the different avenues to bring people in. And Myron talks about things like Spotify, LinkedIn, long form posts. There's lots of different ways, and so so it makes you think a little bit more at a B2B level. Now, if I was Platinum, I probably would actually love to ask them some B2B specific questions around acquisition and how to get people's attention for B2B.
I agree with you in a sense, but I also think some of that is a clarity problem. And they say that because, Daniel Priestley, who Myron talks about quite frequently, and Daniel Priestley was also at Make More Offers Live last year. Myron bought books like Daniel Priestley's book for us, and I had also purchased some on my own. So I'm familiar with Daniel Priestley. His big thing is like talking about how, and you've heard many people talk about this, probably Alex Ramosi as well, that like people don't buy from companies. Like no one buys from big companies, they buy from the brand. Like people aren't buying Kim Kardashian makeup or whatever, and they don't know Kim Kardashian. People might buy their Johnson & Johnson stuff to clean their butt with, but they're not buying from Johnson & Johnson. Like people now want to know more about the brand, like about the personal brand behind the brand. That is like a huge thing. And so Daniel Priestley, he kind of goes into like establishing that personal brand first. And then you and I have recently been laughing at that Verizon commercial with that guy from SNL. What's his name?
Pete Davidson.
Pete Davidson. It's funny, right? Because the mashup between the personal brand that I think Verizon is and who Pete Davidson is, that doesn't mash for me.
And that's why it's hilarious.
It is hilarious, and maybe it's effective because of that. But there is a way to take what Myron's talking about, which feels very B2C, build your personal brand and have that funnel into your business brand. I think you and I just don't have so much clarity on it because it's like his is so seamless and it works so well right now. It's like he knows that he's speaking to entrepreneurs across the board. we kind of are too. I mean, we're talking about lead qualification. We're figuring out how to hone in what we're building with Insteer, but it's like you and I are very much interested in talking to like faith-backed entrepreneurs that, maybe they're they're not VC backed, they're doing it on their own. There's a lot of people in that space, so they're in the medical space or whether they're, even SHI, right? The largest privately held company in the United States was a self-built company without venture
There are
capital.
100 times more businesses that are started without VC funding than there are, maybe 1,000 times more, because the bar is so high.
But my point is, he figured that funnel out from YouTube to his personal brand to King Solomon, whatever the courses that he has, right? We haven't figured that out, and so it feels weird to like, how are we selling this voice AI assistant to the Joe Schmo entrepreneur who we're like,
Have you ever gone back and watched Myron's first videos on YouTube?
They're pretty bad.
Do you remember what they were about?
They're rough.
I haven't watched them.
He talks about, really similar stuff. I mean, he's talking about business principles, and it's even back then. You go and watch some of his videos, and they flip stuff on his head. They're rough because I know Myron with the beard, and so the minute that I see him without the beard, I'm like, it's just like a shocker. And he just doesn't have the level of personality and confidence like at that stage. But he talks about very similar concepts. He's still talking to entrepreneurs that are like, and I think a lot of it is in his season of rebuilding, right? He made a ton of money, lost it all, and a lot of the videos that I've seen, I think they come from that process of when he's rebuilding. At that time, his mom passes away, he loses his son, loses all his money, and these customers aren't paying. He's going through like turmoil. So there's a lot that's happening, but it's really cool to watch him start building.
So you're hearing his zero to hero story.
Well, you hear.
Or you're actually more seeing
he reminds
zero.
you of his zero to hero story. You could be watching him for the first time today in 2025, and you'll hear parts of his zero story. They always come up, and that is an interesting thing of like, you and I don't talk about that. Like, and you're more of a naturally private person than me. If someone was to meet me in real life, I probably talk way too much about all those things. But like, I really like that Myron, especially in this day 3, he talks a lot about the emotional connection and how important it is. And I've always said this, that we make decisions emotionally and we rationalize with logic. I think a car is a great example, a wedding cake, anything. It's like, there's no logical reason for a lot of the things that we do. And he goes into that in that diagram. I don't want to spoil it for people. But yeah, the video is getting kind of long at this point. Is there anything else that we should touch on? Any big takeaways from day 3 that you had? What are you looking forward to for day 4?
I'm looking forward to hearing more around crafting the messaging and being a better communicator at presenting the offer.
That's one thing I want to ask before we wrap up. You said that your approach on how you would communicate with customers has forever changed, and I'm curious what that meant for you.
No one cares about your features. No one cares the fact that it's AI. They don't care. They don't care if it's a human being on the service that we offer. AI, human being, all they care about is the transformation. And if you're getting off track during your call because you want to talk about things you're excited about, you are already casting doubt in their minds. That is extremely valuable for me.
Cool. I think that's a good nugget to end it with.